In the last two videos, we've practiced intervals 1 to 5, finding and recognizing them, starting from any note on the keyboard. If you haven't gone through those videos yet, I recommend doing those first before this one because you kind of need to build up to it. In this video, we're going to be focusing on 6s and 7s. There's not too much point practicing an octave because it's just the same note again. And then in the last video, you can really test yourself where we're going to mix them all together. Finding different intervals by eye on the keyboard when the shapes keep changing is a really important thing to get comfortable doing because the shapes we need to find playing music are intervals or they're made up of intervals. So we're going to start with 6s on their own and practice finding them above and below. Then we're going to do the same with 7s above and below. Then at the end we're going to mix 6s and 7s together and practice finding them as well as recognizing them. So 6s first. This is how I think it's useful to recognize sixths on the piano. So we have minor sixths and major sixths like we did with the 2s and the 3s as well. But the gap's getting a little bit too big, I think, to be counting whole steps and half steps. So I think it's useful to reference a fifth. So once you can find fifths easily, you just use that as a marker and go on a bit further to find the sixths. Here's a quick reminder of how we found fifths. Apart from a couple of exceptions where we start from B or B flat, the colours are always matching and it always feels like the same distance. So apart from B, all the white keys feel like this distance away. So you want to get used to that feel. That feels too big, that feels too small, that feels just right. And it's the same on the black keys. It feels like the same distance except they're matching colours on the black keys. Watch out for the B flats and the Bs. So if you're not comfortable finding fifths yet, you might want to check the previous video in this series and get confident at that first. Let's say a fifth from C, okay? So C and a perfect fifth. Well, a half step above the perfect fifth is the minor sixth. So anytime you want to find a minor sixth, you can reference the fifth and then go a half step onwards. If we were to do it from B flat, if you can recognize that fifth comfortably, half step onwards, so expanding the gap by a half step is a minor sixth. If I were to do that from E, well, we've practiced finding the fifths comfortably. Once you recognize them, expand the gap by a half step. Okay, so if we go back to C again, so that was a fifth. The next one up is a minor sixth. So another half step on is a major sixth. So same method. We can recognize the fifth comfortably, and then we can just this time go on a whole step, above the fifth. So from that fifth, it's a half step, expanding it a half step for a minor sixth, and expanding the gap a whole step for a major sixth. So I'll show you a few examples of major sixths. If we were to do it from F, there's a perfect fifth. If you can recognize that comfortably, use the fifth as a marker, go on a whole step, and you've got a major sixth. If we were to do it from C sharp, there's the perfect fifth. Hopefully you can recognize the feel of that, and then go on a whole step on, which is B flat. So these methods of referencing other notes to find them, they're kind of guides for the time being. Eventually, you will just be able to recognize these sized gaps in their own right with enough experience. So these guides just kind of help you get to that point. The same way that you learn to find C sharp by referencing the note C. Eventually, you don't need to do that anymore. Okay, so we'll start off like we did in the other videos, doing sixths above. So I will play a note and then I will say a major or a minor sixth, and these will all be above for the moment, and you have to find the correct answer, and then I will show you what the answer is afterwards. And just as a reminder, I can't pick a speed that's going to suit everybody, but you can change the playback speed if you need it to go slightly faster or slower on YouTube. Okay, we'll do a couple of minutes of this. So the first one is from G, a major sixth above G. So that should be E. So there's the fifth, and then a whole step beyond that. Okay, D, and a minor sixth above D. That gives you B flat. So there's the fifth, A, go on a half step, gives you B flat for the minor sixth. Okay, from F, a major sixth above F. So that's D. The fifth is there, and then go on a whole step beyond that for a major sixth. C sharp and a major sixth above. You should have A sharp. So G sharp's the fifth, and then a major sixth is a whole step beyond that. Okay, from B flat, a minor sixth. Okay, that should be G flat. So the fifth was F, a minor sixth is a half step beyond that. From A major sixth above A. Okay, that should give you F sharp. So the fifth was E, whole step above the E, gives you F sharp. Okay, F sharp and a minor sixth above that. That gives you D. Let's do one more. E flat and a major sixth above that. Okay, that gives you C. There's the fifth. It's a whole step beyond that. Just quickly, if this video is helpful for you, then can you please click the like button, because that's really helpful for the channel. And let me know in the comments how you get on with this. Okay, we'll try these below now. We'll do a couple of minutes of finding these below. So again, find the fifth. Let's say we were going a major sixth below C. Find the fifth. And then you expand the gap. Expand it by a half step for a minor sixth. Expand it by a whole step for a major sixth. So a major sixth is bigger than a minor sixth, which is bigger than a fifth. Okay, a couple of minutes. Starting from G, let's do a minor sixth below G. That would be B. So there's the size of a fifth, and we're expanding it by a half step. Okay, B flat, a major sixth below B flat. Should have D flat. So there's the fifth, a whole step below. Expanding it by a whole step. A minor sixth below C. Should have E. So there's the fifth, expand it by a half step for a minor sixth. A major sixth below G sharp. So the answer would be B. B to G sharp is a major sixth. A minor sixth below B flat. Okay, so the answer is D. There's the fifth. Expand it by a half step for a minor sixth. Let's do a couple more. A major sixth below E flat. That should be G flat. So the fifth was there. Expand it by a whole step for a major sixth. One more then. Let's do a minor sixth below B. And we've got D sharp. So there's a fifth below. Expand it by a half step for a minor sixth. I do also have a PDF worksheet available from my website, which has a brief recap of all the theory stuff you need to know and a complete list of all the interval names. And lastly, over on my Patreon page, I'll be doing much longer extended versions of the videos in this series and other guided practice sessions to help you train. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with the sevens now. So let me show you how I like to find sevens. The easiest way to find a seventh is to come down from an octave, because an octave is just an eighth, and they're easy to see because it's just the same note again. If we were finding the major seventh of C, we can reference the octave, and then we shrink the gap by one half step. So a major seventh is a half step below the octave. That's the major seventh interval. That's the note we'd use in it's the seventh note of a major scale, has that note in it. And it's the note we have in a major seven chord as well, if you've started learning seven chords yet. Okay, so a minor seventh then is smaller. We've got an octave, and then the next one down is a major seventh, and then the next one down is a minor seventh or a flat seven. I will use those terms interchangeably, but I mean the same thing. So a whole step below the octave is how you find a minor seventh, a flat seventh. Let's do a couple of examples in other keys. So from F, look at the octave, come down a half step for the major seventh, down a whole step for the minor seventh or the flat seventh. From E flat, there's the octave, come down a half step for the major seventh, a whole step for the flat seventh or the minor seventh. Okay, let's do a couple of minutes of this then, going above first. So the first one is from D. Okay, find D and a minor seventh. Okay, you've got C. See, that's a whole step below the octave. G flat and a minor seventh. So there's the octave, down a whole step. Gives you that one. F and a major seventh. The answer's E, it's just a half step below the octave. G flat and a major seventh. So you should have F there. Half step below the G flat. Okay, E and a minor seventh. You've got B, D, it's a whole step below the octave. A flat and a minor seventh. Should have G flat, whole step below the octave. E flat and a major seventh. So that is D, a half step below the octave for the major seventh, C and a minor seventh, or a flat seven. So that gives us B flat. It's a whole step below the octave. Do one more. D flat and a major seventh. That gives us C, which is a half step below the octave. So that major seventh was the note we would use in, for example, a major 7 chord. And that minor seventh, or the flat seventh, we'd use it in a couple of other types of 7 chord. We'd use it in the dominant 7th chord or the minor 7th chord. So now we'll do the 7s going below. So instead of referencing the octave and moving it down, it's the opposite way. So we need to move it up. But if you just think about shrinking the gap, that's an easy way of doing it. So when we went up, we had found the octave and then we shrank the gap by a half step for a major 7. We shrank the gap by a whole step for a minor 7th. So we do the same thing. It just, you know, we were starting from above, so we shrink it up this way. Let me show you an example. If I was to find a major 7th below C, find the octave and then shrink the gap by a half step for a major 7th, or shrink the gap by a whole step for a minor 7th. And then it's a minor 7th from that D, we end up onto C. If I did it from A flat, find the octave below, shrink the gap by a half step for a major 7th, or shrink the gap by a whole step for a minor 7th. Then it's a minor 7th from B flat to A flat. Okay, so we'll do a couple of minutes of 7s going below. Okay, so a major 7th below D. So you should have E flat, find the octave, shrink the gap by a half step. Okay, a minor 7th below B flat. Should have C, it's the octave, shrink the gap by a whole step for a minor 7th. A major 7th below E. So you should have F. That's a major 7th from the F to the E. We've found the octave and shrunk the gap by a half step. A minor 7th below C sharp. So you should have D sharp. So on the octave and shrink it by a whole step. A major 7th below B. So that should be C. Find the octave, shrink it by a half step. A minor 7th below A flat. It gives you B flat. So find the octave, shrink it by a whole step. A minor 7th again, but below E. That would be F sharp. So it's the octave, shrink the gap by a whole step. Okay, so now we'll move on and we'll work on mixing the sixes and sevens together. So I'm going to do this the other way now. I'm going to play two notes together and you have to try and name what the interval is. So it could be minor sixth, major sixth, minor seventh, or major seventh. I'm going to turn the sound down for this. Obviously the sound of these intervals is one of the most important things, but it's just not what we're training at the moment. We're training recognizing the gaps quickly. Okay, so we'll do about 3 minutes of this. So the first one is these two notes. And I'm not going to name the notes because you can work it out from the letters otherwise. Like I say, we're focusing on the visual side of it. This one is a major sixth. This one is a minor sixth. This is a minor seventh or a flat seven. That's a whole step below the octave. This is a major seven. That's a half step below the octave. This one is a major sixth. If you can spot the fifth, that's a whole step beyond that. This is a major seventh. There's the octave, half step below. This is a major seventh as well. There's the octave, half step below. This is a major sixth. If you can spot that fifth, one of the opposite coloured fifths we learned. The sixth is a whole step beyond that. Oh. This is a minor sixth. There's the fifth. I nearly played by accident. And then a half step beyond that is the minor sixth. This is the flat seven, or the minor seven. It's a whole step below the octave. And this is the minor sixth. If you can spot the fifth, it's a half step beyond that. So to finish off, we'll just do a few minutes of mixing them together again, above and below all of those four intervals, finding them. So I'll name a note and I'll say the interval I want you to find, and I'll say whether to find it above or below. So it's going to get a little bit harder for this one probably. Okay, F and a major sixth above. You should have, turn the sound back up, D. So that's a whole step above the fifth. Okay, E flat and a major seventh above. Should have D. Shrinking the gap from an octave by a half step. All right, C and a major sixth below. And you should have E flat. So there's the fifth, and we can expand the gap by a whole step. F sharp and a minor sixth above. So you should have D, if you can spot the fifth. It's a half step beyond that for a minor sixth. E and a minor seventh below. So you should have F sharp. There's the octave, shrink the gap by a whole step for a minor seventh. F and a minor sixth above. Should have D flat. There's the fifth, and you go on a half step for a minor sixth. F sharp and a minor seventh above. So you should have E. There's the octave. A whole step below, shrink it by a whole step for the flat 7 or the minor 7. B and a major sixth above. Okay, so that should be G sharp. So if you can remember that the fifth is one of those opposite coloured fifths, it's F sharp, and then you go a whole step beyond that for the major sixth. So fifth, minor sixth, major sixth. Okay, E and a minor sixth below. And that gives us G. There's a fifth below, expand the gap by a whole step to find the major sixth. I hope that was helpful. Remember to come back for the final video in the series where we're going to be mixing all these intervals together to really test you. And remember, I've got those extended videos which are much longer over on Patreon you can check out if you need.